Hi, and welcome back. In this lecture, we will cover the next collaborative elicitation technique called interface analysis. Put quite simply, interface analysis is the act of doing analysis on existing interfaces in order to obtain information about the as-is situation. When breaking down this definition, we can distinguish multiple characteristics. The first characteristic is linked to the act of doing analysis. There are multiple ways to do analysis on interfaces. There is the self-analysis, so you do an analysis of the interface yourself and write down everything that you see happening and try to find gaps in terms of functionalities. You also have the customer or user review workshop. During these workshops, you showcase the interface to a group of users in order to study the interface and to identify possible improvements in terms of user experience and functionalities. And finally, you have the developer review workshop. During these workshops, you present the interface to developers in order to identify what technical calls are made to the backend. This last one makes sense if you want to create a proof of concept based on the screens that you see at the competition, for instance. The second characteristic is existing interfaces. By existing interfaces, we consider any type of user interface that connects a user with a system. There are two large groups of interfaces. You have interfaces that are used by a company's customers, and you have interfaces that are used by the company's own employees, also known as internal users. For both groups, we want to make sure that the customer or internal user is able to execute a task in a user-friendly way. For customer interfaces, you can imagine any type of app that you're using. The platform on which you watch this very video, for instance, is a user interface. For internal users interfaces, you can imagine the interface that your banker sees, for instance, when he or she is consulting your accounts. The third and last characteristic is about obtaining information on the as-is situation. With interface analysis, you have the latest view on the as-is situation. You have a good idea of what the active functionalities are of the solution. I say active because sometimes companies choose to create dormant functionalities that still need to be activated. You also get a clear view over the interaction points between the user and the system. And you get a clear view on the inputs that are needed and the outputs it produces. And you also have a view of what part of the solution is manual and what part is automated. When would I use interface analysis? I would use it to get an up-to-date view on the functionalities and the processes linked to the existing products and services that are offered to customers or used by internal employees. I would also use it to have a clear understanding of the capabilities that enable those functionalities. This I do by creating a process flowchart that includes the user, the front-end interfaces, and the back-end components. How would I execute an interface analysis? It depends on what type of interface analysis you are running. If it's a self-analysis, then it follows the same approach as documentation review. If you choose to do a review with users or developers, then it's a little different. Let's assume that I want to organize a user review workshop with some external users or customers. The goal of this workshop is to find gaps in the functionalities and ways to improve the existing user interface. As always, it starts with a preparation phase. To do interface analysis in a focused and non-chaotic way, I would opt for a task-based approach, meaning that I would create a set of tasks in advance and ask the user to execute those tasks. So I first need to figure out what functionalities I want to test and create the tasks that envelops those functionalities. Once I have the tasks, I need to create a scoring board that I will use to score the functionalities and the user interface. This will help me to easily identify improvement points and missing functionalities. Next, I need to invite the different participants. Large organizations often have access to user researchers who can contact external users, so I would go via them and ask whether they could schedule multiple user tests. It's important to provide them with a briefing in advance, which describes what you want to test. Often they will also do the facilitation. You might also want to think of certain demographics or segmentation criteria that you want to account for in your user review workshop. Be mindful that the more criteria you include, the harder it becomes to organize a test, as you might not be able to find the right participants. I remember, for instance, that we wanted to test a specific interface that was only available for wealthy customers of the bank. This is quite a touchy topic, as these important customers, and you can't just directly contact them. We first had to inform their relationship manager in order to check if we are allowed to invite those customers to the workshop. In terms of sample size, I would opt for a total of 5 to 6 sessions with just one user each time. This way you gather qualitative feedback where you can identify patterns and you make sure that the participants are not influencing each other. I would also foresee some type of reward for completing the session, but again, this might be arranged by the company. The preparation phase can go quite quickly, so I would say it takes about 2 days to set up the tasks, create a scoring board, and brief the user researchers, if there are any. Next, we go into the introduction phase of the workshop, which should take about 10 minutes. If you happen to do the facilitation yourself, it's important to keep the following points in mind. Introduce yourself and let the participant introduce his or herself. Explain that you are testing the solution and not the participant. You don't want them to stress out. Explain the content of what you're about to test. Also mention that users will get a reward after the session, if one has been foreseen. Then there is the content phase of the review workshop, which should take about 45 minutes. During the content phase, the user executes the different tasks that you defined in the preparation phase. Moving on now to the conclusion phase of the user review workshop, which should take around 5 minutes. During this phase, you ask the participants what they liked and disliked and what they would improve. Don't forget to thank them at the end of the session. Note that if you have 6 participants, you have to do this workshop 6 times already, which amounts to 6 hours. Closing off with the aftercare phase, which should take about 40 minutes. Here I create a user test report with all the findings. A possible structure for your report could be as follows. First, I'd have an executive summary with what was tested, what went well, and what could have been improved, followed by a section to explain who the participants were and some of their demographics, which is then followed by a section for each task, and I also write down what all the users did during that task. I include the screens that were tested as well and finalize with a conclusion section, including the next steps. After creating the report, I send it to the relevant stakeholders. Moving on now to the advantages and disadvantages, starting off with the advantages. Interface analysis provides a crystal clear view on the as-is situation with the existing functionalities, the inputs and outputs of the solution, and the user experience and their interactions. It's easy to detect missing functionalities and points of improvement. And it's easy to understand the link between the front end and the back end. Lastly, it's also a good technique to capture user experience as you get information directly from the source. What are now some of the disadvantages? The elicitation might quickly get very technical. It focuses also too much on the existing situation and minor improvement. So it's not an ideal elicitation technique if you want to go for more radical innovations. As mentioned, 6 review workshops already amount to 6 hours, so it can become quite time-consuming to conduct. And it might sometimes be redundant with quantitative research based on historical data. Here are a couple of best practices that I can give you with regard to facilitating your review workshop. Try to minimize the amount of guidance you give to the participants, as you don't want to have biased results. If they can't complete a task, there might be an issue with the solution. Make sure to record all the steps that the user is going through, or not. Write down any suggestion that the user has made throughout the workshop. Also, remain as neutral as possible. If the user is raving about how much better the competition solution is, let them. You might want to take a look at why that competition solution is so much better. Map the user journey with the links between the user, the interface, and the backend. You might even go as far as mapping the user experience on the different steps of the user journey to really visualize where improvements can be made. Voila, and this concludes the interface analysis elicitation technique. But we're not done yet. I'll see you in the next lecture for even more techniques. Bye!